You're about to hear a compilation of true horror stories from Reddit. For the best experience, use headphones. Liam Gallagher gazed around the quaint suburban neighborhood, taking in the charming houses and tree-lined streets of their new Boston home. It was meant to be a fresh start for him and his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, after the tragic death of his wife, Clara. But today, tranquility was shattered. "Emma?" Liam's voice wavered as he stepped cautiously towards the basement door ajar. Emma's toys were strewn haphazardly across the floor, and that cold dread inched up his spine with every step he took. Her laughter, once filled with uncontainable joy, had ceased. He could vividly recall the last scene before she vanished. Emma, with her bright eyes lined with curiosity and innocence, playing with her plush toy, Anita. Liam had only stepped out for a moment to fetch some laundry. The sudden quietness was unnatural. "Emma," he called again, louder this time, his voice echoing through the dimly lit hallway. His heart pounded with a feverish rhythm as he approached the basement. The musty smell wafted towards him, and the dim, yellowing light bulb flickered erratically. A chill hung in the air, wrapping around him like the grip of unseen hands. As he descended the old creaking stairs, the tension built. Each step felt like a journey into the nightmares trapped in hidden recesses of his mind. The basement extended farther than he remembered, and the air grew colder. The sound of distant, echoing footsteps. Were they his own? Liam flicked on his flashlight, revealing the cluttered basement. Old furniture covered in dusty sheets lined the walls. He moved cautiously, scanning the area for any sign of Emma. The shadows seemed to dance malevolently around him, teasing and mocking his helplessness. Suddenly, Liam's flashlight caught something strange. An unusual seam on the wall hinted at a hidden door. With trembling hands, he pressed against it, and it slid open silently. He inhaled sharply. Cold air rushed out, bringing with it the foul odor of decay. Behind the hidden door, a series of narrow tunnels stretched out, lined with old, yellowing newspaper clippings detailing mysterious disappearances and criminal activities. His pulse quickened. The shadowy labyrinth seemed to pull him deeper into its embrace, revealing snippets of the house's dark history. Emma, Dottie Dee. Her face flashed in his mind. This place was no longer just a house. It was a prison, a place of terror. He knew he had to find her. He ventured into the tunnels, heart hammering and driven by paternal desperation. Each step resonated with the weight of his fear, the walls closing in around him. The path twisted and turned, a cruel maze designed to disorient and torment. As Liam stumbled upon a small, concealed room, his breath caught. Shackles hung from the walls, and the remnants of a gruesome past lay scattered on the floor. This was no ordinary basement. The former tenant had used this space for illegal activities, abductions, perhaps even worse. A chilling realization sank in. The tenant, released from prison, had returned to claim his treasures. Liam's every nerve screamed for him to find Emma before it was too late. The previous owner's dark influence lingered, like a ghostly presence, suffocating and malicious. He followed faint sounds echoing through the tunnels. Emma's voice, her whimpering. The tunnels became a labyrinth not just of walls, but of fear, guilt, and determination. Flashbacks of Clara's death surfaced, her last words haunting him, "Protect Emma." He had promised. The tunnels seemed to close in tighter, almost as if they held a will of their own, leading him towards the tenant's den. Liam's flashlight fell upon symbols and markings etched into the walls, some sort of twisted code or sign. His mind toyed with the horrifying images they conjured, but he forced himself onward. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a larger, dimly lit chamber. There, in shackles, was Emma. Beside her stood a towering figure, Gale Howland, the former tenant, a hulking man with hollow, predatory eyes. The very air seemed to thicken with his presence. "Emma!" Liam yelled, rushing forward, but Gale grabbed a crude, jagged weapon from the ground. Stay back. Gale's voice was a growl, filled with the cruelty that had warped his soul. Liam's heart pounded. Every fiber in his being screamed to protect his daughter. Using his wits, Liam remembered the layout of the tunnels and redirected Gale's attention. He maneuvered around, a battle of desperate strength and ferocious will. Each move was a calculated risk. The chamber echoed with the sounds of struggle, grunts, thuds, the sharp intake of breaths. In a final, desperate burst of energy, Liam managed to grab the weapon from Gale and incapacitate him. The brutal, visceral reality of the fight left him shaking. He rushed to Emma, freeing her from the chains and lifting her into his arms. "Daddy," she whimpered, her small body trembling against his. Tears streamed down his face as relief washed over him. They made their way back through the labyrinthine tunnels. The sensation of being watched never left, each shadow potentially hiding another monster. Liam didn't allow himself to relax until they emerged from the basement, the sunlight streaming into their living room, embracing them in warmth and safety. In the days that followed, police swarmed the house, uncovering the extent of Gale's network. Liam watched as Gale was taken away, but the knowledge that others might still be out there, haunting the shadows, left a lingering dread. Detroit had always been a battlefield, life's undercurrent of violence and decay breeding survivors like Grace Mercer. Her hands, calloused from years of working under the hood of various wrecks, were testament to her resilience. From the age of 14, Grace learned to navigate the city's troubled streets, evading gangs, sidestepping lures to drugs, and ultimately surviving an abusive relationship. Her fiercest battle, however, was the one she faced alone, the battle to live on after her younger brother became a casualty of gang warfare. But if Detroit's streets were a battlefield, the warehouse she found herself in was purgatory. Cracked windows barely let in the day's light, the air heavy with the scent of old oil and rust. The cacophony of distant machinery hummed as a hollow symphony, reminding her of the life outside, a life she might struggle to return to. Her body ached where the bruises from Ronald's rough handling had begun to form. Ronald, a name that once echoed respect and trust. In his prime, he was a decorated cop, a symbol of the city's dwindling sense of justice. But Detroit had its way of devouring its own, and Ronald was no exception. Twisted by the weight of the city's fall from grace, a perversion of justice grew in his soul. Those he deemed unworthy, petty criminals, the broken souls of the city, became his targets for a personal brand of punishment. "You think you can just fix things, Grace. Fix all the broken. I'm here to show you some things can't be fixed." Ronald's voice cut through the dark, distorted by the static of an outdated POS system connected to hidden cameras. Grace's heart pounded, yet she steeled herself. Years of facing down life's adversities had taught her one thing: keep moving or die. The tools she carried for her work, scattered on the floor, became her lifeline. A wrench, a screwdriver, a small flashlight. They weren't weapons, but then neither was she a damsel waiting to be saved. The warehouse, once a bustling center of industry, was now a labyrinth of rusted metal and abandoned machinery. Its creaking floors and darkened corners echoed tales of forgotten labor. But tonight, it would tell a story of survival. Grace moved through the shadows, each step careful, deliberate. Cold drafts wound through gaps in the walls, like the breath of a lurking predator. She was acutely aware of the eyes behind the cameras. Ronald's presence felt more than seen. Flashbacks collided with her reality. The night her brother bled out in her arms. The screams of a woman being beaten. Her own screams from another lifetime. Sounds that still haunted her dreams. She wouldn't become another statistic, another nameless victim in Ronald's crusade. As Grace ventured deeper, she uncovered remnants of Ronald's past victims. Bloodstains, torn fabric, and chilling messages hinted at the horrors that had taken place. Ronald's voice accompanied her discoveries, a macabre narration of his twisted justification. Each one thought they could escape their fate just like you, Grace. But you can't run from judgment. She stumbled upon a table covered in tools. Gleaming in the dim light, they were a macabre collection of devices meant to inflict pain. Her panic surged, only to transform into a steely resolve. Her eyes caught the glint of a welding torch, a spark of hope ignited. Grace's mechanical skills had saved her countless times. Now, they were her shield against the madness. Time became a blur, her body moving with a rhythm born of desperation. She fashioned makeshift defenses, a crude but effective flamethrower, shrapnel-laden traps. Every click of metal, every ignition of sparks, was a symphony of defiance. Ronald's tempered threats reached a fever pitch, his control slipping, unraveling. "I see you, Grace," his voice roared when one of her traps went off, the sound of metal tearing through air. "No one defies me. No one." The climax drew near as Grace navigated the bowels of the warehouse, her path illuminated by the cold, eerie glow of emergency lights. In the heart of the building, a confrontation was inevitable. Ronald's figure emerged from the shadows, his stature imposing, a dark silhouette against the grunge and decay. "What makes you think you can take me down, girl?" Ronald sneered, holding a rusted chain menacingly. Grace's voice, though shaking, retained an edge of defiance. "Because I've faced worse than you, Ronald. I've faced men who didn't just want to end lives. They took pleasure in destroying souls, and they failed." With a fury born from years of fighting unseen battles, Grace activated the modified welding torch. Flames erupted, their light dancing off Ronald's terrified face. A struggle ensued, but each tool, each mechanism she had crafted, played its part. Ronald's screams echoed as Grace used his own instruments against him, culminating in a bitter, desperate tussle. The final moments were a blur of pain and tenacity. Ronald's strength faltered, a final groan escaping his lips as Grace subdued him completely. His network of surveillance, his methodical madness, a prison forged from his own delusions, was unraveled by her sheer will. In the aftermath, as the distant sirens signaled the dawn of her freedom, Grace felt the weight of her scars. Ronald, bound and unconscious, lay amidst the wreckage of his own making. She was free, but the horrors of the night painted shadows on her soul. Detroit would never be the same for Grace. The city had always been a battlefield, but the warehouse was a war zone of the psyche. The psychological scars from her ordeal remained, a testimony to her survival, a warning echoing in the depths of her consciousness. Ronald's arrest garnered some sense of closure, but it was clear that the shadows he resided in were vast, with followers unseen and threads unresolved, ensuring an unease that lingered. Grace walked away from the warehouse, free yet forever marked, a survivor in a city of ghosts and unresolved resonances. Mark's heart raced as the thrumming pulse of the city magnified his urgency. Just moments ago, his sister Rachel had been right by his side, but in the blink of an eye, the rain-soaked streets had swallowed her whole. Though Seattle's glow tried to mask its sinister undertones, he knew from the gut-wrenching fear gnawing at his insides that something unspeakable was lurking in those shadows. Mark Johnson was every inch the determined college student. His existence revolved around balancing his studies and working tirelessly to provide for his younger sister, Rachel. It had only been a year since their parents perished in a tragic car accident, leaving Mark as the sole provider and protector of his sister. Rachel had a mind of her own, a rebellious teenager always seeking freedom from the chains of their shared grief. Their relationship was a tempest of conflicting needs, Mark's overprotectiveness versus Rachel's irrepressible desire to carve her path. While Seattle's reign seemed perpetual, both literal and metaphorical clouds hovered over the siblings' lives. Mark had often told himself that it was just normal, teenage angst. He was wrong. The night Rachel disappeared was a cacophony of neon glows, and the steady beat of rain against the wet concrete. But beneath that vibrant facade, the eerie stillness lurked, waiting to unveil the city's darkest secrets. For Mark, Rachel was more than a sister. She was his redemption, his chance to protect someone he loved, unlike his parents. When she failed to answer his frantic calls and texts, he could almost hear his mother's voice urging him not to lose her too. The smell of wet concrete, the dimly flickering streetlights reflecting in murky, puddle-strewn alleyways, all painted a chilling picture of her possible fate. Seattle, a city of contrasts. By day, its bustling streets hummed with the rhythm of lawfulness, a rainbow palette of experience and opportunity. By night, under a veil of rain-soaked darkness, it transformed into a maze of foreboding alleys and forgotten corners. The dichotomy was Mark's new hell. With Rachel gone, he couldn't just rely on the police's lackadaisical efforts. His search became obsessive. Paperwork snarled in bureaucratic red tape, descriptions ignored. He needed to take matters into his own desperate hands. Days turned to restless, pseudo-sleep-filled nights spent combing through Rachel's text trails and social media. Clues dripped in, each more unsettling than the last. His break came through a peculiar tip-off. Discreet, coy whispers about a secret society of urban explorers reached his ears. It wasn't just urban legends. It was a network of thrill-seekers who ventured beneath the city through forgotten tunnels and decrepit buildings. And it wasn't thrills they sought, but something more sinister. Time slipped away as Mark dove deeper into Seattle's underground. One contact led to another, each thread fraying as quickly as it was pulled, until the name surfaced: Lawrence Hale, a former architect with a god complex. Hale's grand design of a new order using the city's belly was madness painted as genius. Charismatic yet unhinged, his reveries unfolded from the city he viewed as a canvas for chaos, where the rules of civilized society dissolved. It was never going to be easy getting into their fold. Mark had to navigate dense layers of fear disguised as curiosity, though clues of Rachel being taken lured ever darker. The origins of this secret society were steeped in shadows. Police reports of missing persons were tied to locations of abandoned structures, places Hale deemed essential for his grand blueprint. He wasn't building inaccessible towers, but labyrinths where people disappeared without a trace. Cold, waiting time turned torturously slow, each minute unraveling Mark's sanity. Rain became an ambient reminder of his sister's last known whereabouts. When he finally made it inside the underground lair, it seemed as though the air itself whispered of the subdued screams its walls had absorbed. Hale's lair reeked of decaying dreams. Abandoned artifacts of civilization cluttered the tunnels, architectural models, weapons of psychological manipulation strewn about like the skeletons of dreams gone grotesque. The final showdown was inevitable and drawn with tension. Amidst the macabre remnants of Hale's new order, Rachel's hollow cries echoed. "Mark!" The shriek felt like a tangible blow. There she was, fragile and bound in the clutches of illusion Hale fancied as salvation. The ensuing confrontation was a tempest, a physical and mental battle where Hale's diluted verses clashed with Mark's raw determination. Hale's eloquence slowly unraveled into madness as Mark bore the scars of his struggle for each step closer to Rachel. Physically and emotionally drained, the climax focused on the crescent arc of Mark's transforming rage and guilt, converging into a strike that knocked out Hale. The psychological toll remained heavy. Rachel was safe, but only by the facts of logic. The horrors she had endured, the manipulation endured, left indelible marks etched in her existence. Mark's narrow escape with Rachel wasn't a mutual absolution, but a beginning of deeper complexities. Eric's life was measured by pixels and code, an unassuming technician. His days were monotonous, filled with the soft hum of computers and the mechanical clatter of keyboards. Yet, every evening felt different, colorful, vibrant even, ever since Jess had walked into his life. Jess was a force of nature, an artist with an unconventional spirit that seemed to leap from her vibrant canvases. They balanced each other perfectly. His quiet steadiness complemented her untamed zest for adventure. That night, however, their usual laughter in the bar district of Dallas would be swallowed by an abyss of dread. Eric returned from the restroom to find Jess missing. Her phone lay abandoned on the bar counter, an absurdly ordinary object in an unfolding nightmare. The bustling nightlife blurred into muted chaos as he frantically searched, questioning bar patrons and staff, his voice growing raw with each unanswered plea. The police arrived, but the flashing blue and red lights and the matter-of-fact questioning offered little solace. They were procedural, detached, as if Jess's vibrant spirit could be reduced to a case number. Eric was thrust into a state of helplessness, drowning in the overwhelming guilt that consumed him. How could he, an observant technician, have missed any signs of this impending disaster? Days turned into a fog of sleepless nights and desperate chases. Eric combed through Jess's social media, her sketchbooks, even old text messages, hoping to find a lead. His discoveries were meager and cryptic, mentions of an old friend who resurfaced, the uncomfortable feeling Jess had shrugged off, and sketches that grew darker, more obscure. Dallas, a sprawling metropolis of contradictions, became his maze. The bright, bustling bar districts dissolved into shadowy underpasses and eerie, abandoned buildings. Each location seemed to mock him with its normalcy by day and sinister possibility by night. Every lead brought him closer to the edge, revealing just how deeply fear could gnaw at his sanity. The kidnapper, shrouded in an aura of twisted obsession, made his presence known through taunting messages. Each note was a calculated attempt to break Eric. Letters left on his doorstep, all signed by someone he recognized, a former friend of Jess, now a phantom fueled by a sick sense of justice. This puppet master had meticulously planned Jess's abduction for months, transforming his friendship into a grotesque fixation. Soon, clues began to form a dark tapestry. The abductor's deranged mind was exposed through letters dripping with psychotic eloquence, detailing his sick vision of retribution for perceived slights. Jess had been a muse-turned-prisoner in his twisted gallery of revenge. Eric's escalating fear spurred a surprising determination. He was no longer the passive technician, but a man fueled by love and guilt, piecing together a puzzle of obsessive control and warped justice. Each step deeper into the city's underbelly brought him closer to the terrifying climax. The ultimate confrontation unraveled at an isolated farmhouse on the Dallas outskirts, a place where decrepit walls whispered decades of unspeakable acts. The air was thick with decay, each step echoing a palpable dread. Inside, Eric found Jess bound, her vibrant spirit dimmed but unbroken. The kidnapper emerged from the shadows, a chilling manifestation of obsession. Their confrontation was a cacophony of raw physicality and mental acuity. Every blow, every desperate maneuver was a fight, not just for survival, but for the reclamation of Jess's freedom and Eric's own humanity. This harrowing episode culminated in Eric's narrow victory. Jess, though rescued, bore psychological scars that would forever haunt her. The kidnapping had seared a trail of trauma, etching into their once carefree relationship a new, gritty determination to rebuild from the wreckage. The kidnapper, restrained and subdued, was handed over to the authorities, his arrest a bitter conclusion to a tormenting chapter. While the immediate nightmare had ceased, Eric and Jess's new reality was fraught with unease. The psychological torment of the past lingered, a constant shadow over their lives. The hint of other victims left an unsettling openness, suggesting a world where lurking darkness often outweighs the light. Eric's journey from a mundane existence into an abyss of fear showcased the chilling depths of human obsession and cruelty. His transformation revealed a latent strength, catalyzed by love and guilt, carving a path through the darkest alleys of Dallas to rescue his kindred spirit. Jess's survival, though marred by trauma, reflected a resilience that defied the perverse control of her captor. Lydia traced her finger along the rim of her coffee cup. The thin line of foam from her cappuccino was the only thing steady in her trembling grip. Her eyes darted from the bustling cafe entrance to her phone, the 2-minute mark of Maya's absence stretching into an eternity. Maya, her free-spirited, vivacious best friend, who was always there to pull Lydia out of the darkest days, was now inexplicably gone. The sunlit streets of Chicago, bustling with life and energy, now seemed a backdrop for her growing dread. The day had started like any other, a rare break in Lydia's relentless pursuit of justice. As a journalist driven by the unresolved disappearance of her sister, she rarely allowed herself moments of tranquility. Maya's suggestion for coffee in their favorite spot had seemed like a small respite from Lydia's stormy life. But now, the once comforting environment had turned sinister, the shadows under the chairs stretching long and ominous. Lydia's mind raced, recalling every detail of their morning. Maya had been chatting about an upcoming art show, her laughter blending seamlessly with the surrounding chatter. There was no sign, no warning. A specter had reached out from the ordinary and snatched Maya away. Determined, Lydia leaped into action. She called Maya's phone incessantly, each unanswered ring a punch to her gut. She questioned the baristas, the patrons, anyone who might have seen something, anything. But the responses were all the same, nothing out of the ordinary. As dusk crept in, Lydia found herself wandering the city's shadowy alleys and abandoned warehouses, driven by a gut feeling that Maya was near. Chicago was a city of contrasts, its towering buildings casting long shadows over its labyrinthine alleys. The vibrant, lively cityscape juxtaposed against the dimly lit corners where the underbelly thrived. In her search, Lydia stumbled upon strange, disturbing clues. A flyer for a charity event featuring prominent figures. A discarded bracelet she recognized too well. It was Maya's. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. This was no random disappearance. Each clue led her deeper into a sophisticated human trafficking ring, its operations hidden behind the veneer of a respected charity organization. The leader, a man admired in society for his philanthropy, turned out to be the puppeteer of this vile act. Lydia's investigations were filled with tense conversations, each one a chess game, filled with misdirection and danger. She faced intimidating police officers unwilling to delve further, slipped through encounters with dangerous associates, and sought reluctant allies buried deep within the city's underground. Her internal struggle was profound, the echoes of her sister's disappearance haunting her every step. She battled the fear of losing another loved one, her determination fraught with past trauma. The journey transformed her rage and despair into a fierce resolve. The climax came one stormy night in a deserted warehouse at the city's edge. The confrontation was brutal, a test of Lydia's resilience and courage. She faced the leader of the trafficking ring, a man whose affable public persona cracked under the pressure of exposure. Lydia had to dodge blows, navigate the perilous, dimly lit maze of the warehouse, and fight her way to where Maya was held. When Lydia finally reached her, Maya was barely recognizable, her spirit broken but not lost. Lydia's heart shattered at the sight, but her resolve hardened. The ensuing chaos allowed them a narrow escape, Lydia leveraging her knowledge and sheer willpower to outmaneuver their captors. Emerging from the shadows of the warehouse just as dawn began to break, Lydia and Maya were finally safe. But the victory was bittersweet. Lydia knew that the trafficking ring's influence spread far beyond what she had imagined.